In his most recent sit-down with Variety, Robert Duvall, the flinty standard-bearer of unvarnished acting from The Godfather and Apocalypse Now, stopped biting his tongue. Now, in his 90s, he spoke with a measured calm about betrayals and professional scars he'd never aired. He said some tried to strip him of assets. Others took swings at him on live TV, smudging his name. Worst of all, the man Duvall once called his first teacher led the Whisper campaign to freeze him out of Hollywood. So who exactly did he bring into the light, and who hurt him most? Summer of 1971, New York sweltered. Inside Paramount, The Godfather churned forward. Francis Ford Coppola, just over 30, sleepless and wired by studio pressure, hovered over every frame. Among the anxious crew, one figure strolled as if time waited for him. Marlon Brando, already an institution, the supposed soul of American cinema. Duvall, by contrast, was still a respected stagehand, newly stepping into film, a supporting presence with something to prove. Brando's first day reset the weather in the room. Nearly 2 hours late, cigarette in hand, dark glasses on, 3 personal assistants in tow. No one dared scold him. When he walked in, the set went silent, like a president just arrived, a lighting tech later told the New York Post. At first, Duvall admired him without reservation. He knew On the Waterfront and A Streetcar Named Desire by heart. Freedom was what Brando seemed to embody. But within weeks, reverence gave way to unease. Brando wouldn't learn lines, skipped group read-throughs, and demanded cue cards all over the stage, at one point taped to James Caan's back, so he could glance and go. A crew member told The New Yorker he stood behind the camera 6 straight hours holding dialogue boards. Lay an acting class in poor memory, he joked later. What stung Duvall more was Brando's habit of using unpredictability to rule the room. In high-stakes scenes, Brando would deliberately swerve from scripted lines, scrambling partners' rhythms and forcing retakes. He never let you know what he'd do, the crew said. Coppola, who also idolized Brando, tolerated it. To Duvall, this wasn't daring. It was showy chaos with a slick finish. March 1972. The film opened and detonated in culture. Brando, hailed as the Immaculate Dawn, got the waterfalls of praise. Duvall was called rock solid. Shortly after, Variety reported a hush-hush $50,000 bonus had been slipped to Brando by Paramount for his media impact, while no one else received $1. An internal accounting leak set tempers simmering. One Los Angeles Times reporter wrote that Duvall left a press event early, face like stone, March 27, 1973. At the Oscars in Los Angeles, when Brando won Best Actor, he didn't show. He sent Sachin Littlefeather, a Native American activist, to refuse the statuette and call out Hollywood's distortion of indigenous people, live. America split in half, Truth Teller versus Reckless Showboat. Duvall watched from home. Headlines screamed, "Brando turns Oscars into political stage." For Duvall, that was it. He felt the gesture betrayed those who sweated to make the film. Brando's off-screen theatrics piled up. On The Tonight Show in 1975, he brought a live parrot, leaving Johnny Carson blinking. In 1978, he reportedly threw a Los Angeles Herald-Examiner journalist out of his house for asking about his weight. The town began calling him a brilliant madman. Duvall called it a symphony of self-destruction. 1990. Real-life catastrophe. Brando's son, Christian Brando, shot his sister Cheyenne's boyfriend at Brando's Beverly Hills home. NBC, CNN, ABC News ran wall-to-wall for a week. Through the nearly 2-year case, Brando sat in court, hair gray, face heavy, weeping when his son drew 10 years. The press labeled it the Corleone tragedy in real life. Christian went to prison. Cheyenne spiraled into depression and later died in Tahiti. Brando spent his last years isolated, tipping 140 kilo, avoiding cameras. Esquire wrote, Brando created the great Don Vito Corleone, then spent the rest of his life becoming him. 1991. Asked casually, Duvall told a Beverly Hills gaggle, "Genius is sometimes just chaos shot up close." He didn't bring up Brando again. 2004, Brando died in Los Angeles at 80. The funeral at Hillside Memorial drew hundreds. Duvall wasn't there. A former crew member said he sent Coppola a plain card with 3 words, "Let it end." Of all Duvall's clashes, only Brando left him both awed and gutted, a monument crumbling in slow motion, teaching him that talent without discipline often dies from within. By the mid-1970s, Hollywood lionized 2 species of leading men, the monk, quiet craftsman, Robert Duvall, and the electric live wire, Al Pacino. Early on, they were inseparable. A Los Angeles Herald-Examiner piece recalled they briefly shared a tiny place in Beverly Glen, splitting rent, living on canned noodles, drilling lines into the small hours. Duvall taught Pacino breath control. Pacino taught Duvall how to let fury flash only in the eyes. Brothers, people on the first Godfather set called them, 2 men in one trailer, cold coffee in hand, swearing they'd chase truth, not fame. Then 1974 landed, and Part 2 vaulted Pacino to global superstardom. Covers of Time, Rolling Stone, People. Duvall, hailed as the screen's most reliable presence, retreated to his Virginia farm, horses, plays, hand-picked roles. The paths diverged. No one spoke of it, but the gap was there. 1989, Paramount called The Godfather Part III. Variety dubbed it the reunion of the century. Meetings went well, until the numbers. The Hollywood Reporter said Pacino was offered $5 million plus 5% of the gross. Duvall was offered $1 million, not even a fifth. September 4, 1989, Variety blared, Paramount bets on Pacino, forgets Duvall. In the building, the air thinned. A PR staffer said Duvall read the contract 3 times, stayed silent, stood, and left. Days later, he faxed Coppola, "I won't come back to play anyone's backdrop." When Duvall officially bowed out, the New York Post called it a heartbreaking crack in the wall of icons. Tom Hagen, moral ballast of the first 2 pictures, was erased, reduced to a single mention. Rumors said Coppola asked Pacino to trim his fee so Duvall could return. Pacino declined. An Entertainment Weekly deep dive quoted a Paramount insider. Pacino said, "That's the studio's business, not mine." And a culture war bloomed. One man chose paycheck. The other principal, December 20th, 1990. The third film premiered at Mann's Chinese Theater in Los Angeles. Everyone attended except Robert Duvall. The Los Angeles Times reported he flew to Virginia that morning to duck the flashbulbs. A close friend said he couldn't bear hearing the theme without Tom Hagen's face. The picture earned money, but critics pined for a center it didn't have. The Chicago Tribune. When Duvall left, The Godfather lost its voice of reason. The distance hardened. In 2011, at the Oscars Godfather reunion, cameras caught Pacino and Duvall less than 3 meters apart, neither looking toward the other. 2 shadows sharing space, not gaze. The press called it a silent war for half a century. No outbursts, no insults, just a void. One chose fame, the other principle. Both flourished, never again in the same frame. Winter 1980, fog-wrapped England. At the Odeon Leicester Square, The Shining had just opened, and the British press erupted. The Guardian hailed Stanley Kubrick as the man who turns nightmares into art. Time called him a conductor of fear. Crowds poured into theaters, but 6,000 m away at his Virginia cabin, Duvall watched a BBC primetime special, Vivian Kubrick's making-of documentary, feeling colder by the minute. The behind-the-scenes footage showed Shelley Duvall, no relation, hair in disarray, eyes bruised by exhaustion, clutching a bat with trembling hands. Kubrick demanded 127 takes for a single sequence, waving off breaks again. A lighting tech later told The Independent, 2005, that Shelley was isolated from others, lost hair daily, and needed months of care at Maida Vale after the shoot. When the special aired, audiences were stunned. The BBC called it a masterpiece paid for in tears. Friends say Robert Duvall sat for hours afterward, chain-smoking, not leaving his chair. To an actor who believes the craft is empathy, the footage looked like torment shot on an Arriflex 35. Few knew that in February 1981, Kubrick invited him to London to discuss the Aryan Papers, an unproduced script in which Kubrick wanted Duvall as a conflicted German officer. Curious, Duvall went, The meeting took place at a small office in Borehamwood Studios. Present Kubrick, Duvall, and Leon Vitali. No jokes, no coffee. For nearly 30 minutes, Kubrick spoke. Lighting schemes, how actors should breathe, how to control audience nerves by tempo. Duvall listened, unsmiling. A security guard later told the Telegraph that when Duvall left, he told the driver, "The air in there was colder than a morgue." The Aryan Papers was later abandoned without explanation. Duvall went home and declined further talks. In a private letter to Horton Foote, archived at UCLA, he wrote, "I can't work with a man who treats feelings as tools. That kind of art can make an audience cry and leave the actor empty." Fast forward 2010. On the Hollywood Reporter Roundtable with Ryan Gosling, Colin Firth, Jeff Bridges, Robert Duvall was asked about the hardest director. He answered plainly, Stanley Kubrick was the enemy of actors. A hush. Variety headlined it the next day. The town split in two, some called Duvall old school. Others, having just watched the behind-the-scenes resurface on YouTube, nodded hard. Duvall's phrase, emotionless genius, became shorthand for the forever debate. Art versus humanity. 2012, The Atlantic ran, Robert Duvall was right about Kubrick. In 2015, Esquire asked again, Duvall, a genius, yes. A genius without a heart. The bitter irony? The teacher Duvall once revered, Francis Ford Coppola, began to resemble Kubrick in scope, if not style. Grand visions, escalating distance. And that became Duvall's second great heartbreak. In the early 1970s, few partnerships seemed more in tune than Coppola and Duvall. They met in 1971 at a small Paramount audition in Los Angeles. Coppola, 32, took one look and told producer Albert S. Ruddy, "He's the Tom Hagen I've been looking for." In a sentence, the New York stage veteran became an international face. The Godfather, 1972, altered cinema and welded director and actor like brothers. Dinners at Coppola's San Francisco house, jazz on the stereo, long talks about letting silence do the acting. Duvall thought he'd found the mentor who proved that movies could be bigger than life itself. Then came The Jungle. 1976, the Philippines, Apocalypse Now, a production that truly became Hellshot on 35mm. Duvall's Latesh Kolobur, Kilgore, eccentric, unforgettable, delivered the line that turned immortal. I love the smell of napalm in the morning. The shoot was a war zone. Coppola rented real choppers from the Philippine military, blew real charges on Baylor Beach, raised whole camps in the Luzon jungle. Heat topped 40 degrees, humidity near 100%. Days ran 18 hours under smoke and thunder. In Eleanor Coppola's Dark Hearts of Darkness, a filmmaker's apocalypse, crew recalled Duvall collapsing from dehydration once. Do it again. The light isn't real enough, they remembered Coppola saying. A camera operator told the Los Angeles Times he vomited blood slightly, then got back on a horse and did the scene that afternoon. No one dared cross the line. 79. Apocalypse Now thundered into legend. Palme d'Or at Cannes, critics wrote, the film belongs to Coppola, the heart belongs to Duvall. The compliment cut both ways. The bond thinned. Duvall drifted back to Virginia. Coppola plunged into new battles. Then 1989 brought Godfather Part 3 and The Contract fiasco. Duvall's offer, $1 million. Pacino's, $5 million plus 5%. September 5th, 1989. Variety. Duvall refuses Godfather 3 over Pay and Justice. The quote that echoed, I won't act in a film about family if that family doesn't respect each other. Coppola tried mending the break. Letters, phone calls, even asking Mario Puzo to mediate. Duvall stayed silent. October 1991, Napa Valley fundraiser, they crossed paths. People magazine wrote, Duvall turned away without a word. Coppola stood frozen. The following year, after Bram Stoker's Dracula cratered financially and Coppola lost over $30 million, Esquire asked Duvall if he pitied his old mentor. He answered, arrogance doesn't buy loyalty. 2011, Coppola received an Academy Lifetime honor. He took the stage to roaring applause. Duvall's seat mid-row sat empty. A late-night broadcast captioned the moment. Two legends, two worlds, no longer speaking the same language. And that was that. No apology, no handshake. The teacher lost the student who'd say, "Enough." The student lost the compass he once trusted most. Before either became a monument, Robert Duvall and Dustin Hoffman were just two broke actors sharing a shabby loft on East 58th Street. New York, 1959, 15 square meters, damp walls, winter so cold they set candles for warmth. They studied at the neighborhood playhouse, sipped cheap coffee at Horn and Hardart, chased unpaid auditions for a single shouted line. They read Tennessee Williams under a broken lamp and split every cigarette. One day, they swore, both names would glow on a Broadway marquee. Then 1967 arrived. Hoffman shot into the stratosphere with The Graduate. Overnight, he became a generation's emblem. Time splashed him on the cover. The anti-star who became a star. Duvall still scrambled. TV bits, nighttime theater, teaching to cover rent. Hoffman changed with fame. He embraced what pros called absolute method, eating, sleeping, speaking in character. Duvall, a believer in discipline and clear boundaries, grew wary. For him, acting was craft. For Hoffman, it became immersion. The friction smoldered for years. Chiedo 76. On Marathon Man with Laurence Olivier, Hoffman stayed awake 3 nights for a tortured look. Olivier famously quipped, "Why not try acting, dear boy? It's much easier." The New York Times front page, November 14, 1976, cast it as the new generation's extremism. 3 years later, Kramer vs. Kramer won the Oscars and buried a friendship. During one argument scene, Hoffman slapped Meryl Streep without warning. She burst into tears and left the set. Director Robert Benton halted for an hour. The Los Angeles Herald-Examiner asked, "Method or emotional abuse?" Hollywood called it devotion. Duvall called it a violation. He told Bill Murray privately he no longer recognized Dustin. By the early 1980s, they'd nod at award shows, eyes colder. 1989, at the Oscars after-party at the Beverly Hilton, Vanity Fair reported Duvall rose and left when Hoffman entered, without greeting. "Silence between two monumentos," the caption read. 20 years of brotherhood drifted away without a word. Time rolled on. Hoffman stayed A-list, but the shine scuffed. 2017, as scandals roiled the industry, his name resurfaced in retrospectives, The Hollywood Reporter, Variety, The Guardian publishing long reads. That same season, Duvall, now in his 80s, spoke at an AFI panel. Asked about ethical limits in performance, he didn't say a name. He simply said, "Some forget actors borrow life to tell stories. They don't have the right to own it." The auditorium sat still, then erupted. Entertainment Weekly called it the heaviest statement Hollywood heard without a name. Two men who once ate from the same can in a cold New York room became opposing poles of the craft. One chose discipline, one chose extremes. The friendship thinned to vapor, leaving behind one bitter lesson: some who chase truth on camera lose themselves before they know it. 1969. The shoot began summer of 1968. Paramount's True Grit set up shop in Ridgeway, Colorado, between the snowy San Juan Peaks and the scorched Uncompahgre Desert. The whole town became a stage. Wagons, dust, blanks snapping, sun-bleached fields forming the era's richest Western canvas. At the center was veteran director Henry Hathaway, so strict a raised brow muted the crew. Next to him, John Wayne, America's Colossus, past 60, pushing 100 kilos, limping, still emanating command. Robert Duvall, 37, fresh off The Detective, 1968, was cast as outlaw, Lucky Ned Pepper. Duvall had admired Wayne since boyhood. Within weeks, the myth thinned. According to assistant director Hal Needham's True Grit Diaries, August 18, 1968, Hathaway ordered a reshoot of the Uray Valley duel. The mercury hit 42 by day, dust everywhere. Hathaway wanted Duvall rigid, hollow-eyed, death already in him. Duvall argued Ned Pepper was a shattered man, haunted and shaky. The back and forth lasted nearly 30 minutes in the flies and the fan noise. Wayne, who treated director's orders like scripture, boiled. A logistics hand later told the Los Angeles Herald that Wayne marched over and shouted so loudly it bled into the mic. Seconds later, Duvall hurled his hat. Wayne raised a hand as if to strike. The set froze. Hathaway cut and shut down for 2 days to cool tempers. The story leaked. Life ran a December 1969 spread, Robert Duvall, the man who wouldn't bow to America's icon. Producer Hal Wallace later wrote that Wayne leaned on Paramount to keep Duvall out of westerns for 3 years. Even so, when True Grit opened, 1969, audiences jammed theaters. It grossed over $30 million, enormous for the time. Wayne won his first Best Actor Oscar. Duvall's name wasn't called. Ironically, the dust storm sequence, the very scene that cost 2 days, was praised by the New York Times as the film's truest moment. The frost lingered. At a 1970 Academy after-party, Wayne sat at the same table telling hunting stories, never meeting Duvall's eyes. 1971, Playboy published Wayne's now infamous interview on race and politics. The town gasped. Protests spread. Among the few who answered publicly was Duvall in the Boston Globe. A true icon listens to his times. He doesn't appoint himself to define them. The right boycotted Duvall. The young called him a new kind of hero, an actor willing to challenge power to protect the work. Wayne died June 11, 1979. Aussie. National funeral aired on NBC and ABC. Stars lined up from Clint Eastwood to James Stewart. One seat on the honorary row stayed empty. Robert Duvall. His rep told the Los Angeles Times he didn't want to play a guest role in a scripted show. A week later, Variety blasted Robert Duvall, the only man who didn't bow at America's funeral. The line became his inadvertent manifesto. Cold, truthful, never acting a part he didn't believe in. Looking back, critics called the Colorado blow-up not just a clash of tempers, but a hinge moment, from spotless heroes like John Wayne to raw truth-tellers like Duvall. 1968 was the fracture line. New directors, Mike Nichols, Dennis Hopper, Arthur Penn, pushed looser forms while the old guard clung to strict scripts and kingly directors. True Grit straddled both worlds, and Henry Hathaway, 70, helmed it with an iron cane. Over 60 films behind him, Niagara with Marilyn Monroe, How the West Was Won. He was feared and revered. Paramount poured $1.5 million into turning Ridgeway into the 1880s West. A 200-plus crew took orders like an army. Duvall, 37, not long past To Kill a Mockingbird, arrived hungry to prove himself as Ned Pepper. He studied real outlaw records and Billy the Kid's writings. Then he met the immovable wall named Hathaway. Hathaway disliked improvisers. Every feeling belonged to the camera, not the actor. In Paramount Diaries, 1970, a lighting tech wrote, "He shouted all day, sometimes through his cane, into the prop bin when someone slipped." Duvall pushed back. The explosion came September 12, 1968, during the final showdown with John Wayne's Rooster Cogburn. Hathaway demanded a statue. Duvall demanded a dying man's fear. Words escalated. Hathaway slammed his director's chair into the ground. A splinter clipped the Arriflex 35L and cracked the lens. The crew went dark for nearly 3 hours. Wayne tried smoothing it over. Hathaway wouldn't bend. Reporter James Bacon wrote that Duvall was iced out right after. No talk at breaks, meals apart, lines cut from the last 2 scenes. "I'll teach him to respect the commander," Hathaway was overheard saying. True Grit wrapped after 4 grueling months. It opened June 1969. Wayne took the Oscar. Duvall got no nod. Variety wrote, "A brilliant performance buried beneath bigger shadows." In the 1970s, Paramount directors whispered that Duvall was hard to work with, code for semi-blacklisted. 1982, Peter Bogdanovich told Esquire Paramount once passed on Duvall because Hathaway didn't want his name on the sheet. 1985, Hathaway died in Los Angeles. Variety's obit, the last genius of classical Hollywood, dies in solitude. Duvall, filming The Apostle in Texas, was asked about the funeral. He shook his head. No need to revisit the past. Later, in a rare New Yorker interview, asked about True Grit, he paused a long time, then said softly, "That film taught me the value of freedom. No one has the right to command feelings." From Hathaway, he drew a hard lesson. The great director isn't the one who commands actors, but the one who hears them. Texas, spring 1982. Under a white-hot Waco sky, the Tender Mercies crew built a small wood church off the highway. Inside it, Robert Duvall, as Mac Sledge, a washed-up country singer, would sing "On the Wings of a Dove," a moment critics later called the 1980s soul of American cinema. No one knew that right after, a quiet war would flare between Duvall and director Bruce Beresford. Lasting all the way to the Oscars 2 years later, Beresford, early 40s, fresh off Australia's Breaker Morant, was meticulous to the millimeter, every pan like sheet music, every shadow placed. Duvall, by then a seasoned pillar, believed movies should breathe, imperfections and all. Day one, they collided. The Dallas Morning News says on April 15, 1982, during the first scene, Beresford asked for a slower cadence to match his edit. Duvall balked. A drunk man never talks slow. After that, crew members say Duvall began grabbing some material with the second unit, without the main. Director, taboo in Hollywood. The war. Flashpoint was the church sequence, the scene the new. York Times would later call the film's soul. Duvall wanted 5 a.m. The blue-gray Texas dawn. Beresford insisted on late light, warmer, prettier. The argument ran toward midnight. Duvall quietly called the second unit and shot at dawn before Beresford arrived. When the director learned of it, he walked off to his hotel in Austin, leaving 30-plus crew idle for half a day. Universal sent a mediator. Ironically, the rogue dawn take became the key moment in the cut. Variety, March 1984. The truest moment, a slight human tremble in the early light, crafted by no one but Duvall. Post-shoot, the chill remained. Duvall asked to be in the edit, afraid the living edge would be sanded smooth. Universal said no. Esquire ran, Duvall shut out of the editing table of his own role. The studio denied. Insider smirked. March 1984. Against odds, Tender Mercies made history. On a $4.5 million shoestring, it won 2 Oscars, Best Actor for Robert Duvall among them. At the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, he walked up in a plain brown suit, thanked Horton Foote and the Texas crew, and did not mention Bruce Beresford. The hall went silent for a long beat. Next morning, The Hollywood Reporter. Cold slap at the Oscars. Duvall ignores his director. The Sydney Morning Herald found Beresford. He said, "I respect him. We can never work together again." Duvall declined talk shows, left town, holed up in Virginia for months. He had learned the cruel paradox. Victory cannot mend every fracture. Sometimes success simply throws a light on the fault lines. Years later, on Inside the Actor's Studio, asked about Tender Mercies, he said, "Sometimes you choose loyalty to the character or to someone else. I chose the character." He then doubled down, writing, directing, producing. The Apostle, 1997 foremost, proof he no longer needed anyone to govern his feelings.